When it comes to who is the greatest swordsman in Westeros, three names come to mind for any fan. The first is Sir Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, the finest knight Ned Stark had ever seen. The second is Sir Barristan the Bold, regarded as the truest embodiment of knighthood by both the people of Westeros and fans of the series alike. And of course, the third is Jaime Lannister, whose religion is swordsmanship. And Cersei, but mainly swordsmanship. These are the Golden Three. Jaime is often regarded as the most naturally talented of the three, able to hang with Dayne and Barristan on the skill front, but is possessed of an arrogance and pride the other two aren't, which often sees him pushed to the bottom of the pile by most fans. But Dayne and Barristan are considered dead equal, 50-50, with neither one having the edge on the other were they to cross blades. Unless Dayne is wielding Dawn, the ancestral sword of House Dayne. Dawn makes the difference. But why? Well, Tom wanted an answer to this and thought may as well get a video out of it and talk about one of the coolest swords put to fiction too, eh? Before we start, don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and Discord, we have one. Join it if you want to reach us more directly, or don't, we honestly don't care, each to their own. Now, let's break down what makes Dawn so special and maybe dispel some myths about this one-of-a-kind fantasy weapon. Not a lot is known about Dawn. It is speculated to be 10,000 years old in universe, and George R.R. Martin has confirmed it is at least 2,000 years old and is purported to be forged from the heart of a falling star, which many assume is the ore from a meteorite. Unlike the legendary swords of other houses who pass their Valyrian steel blades down from lord to heir, Dawn may only be wielded by a knighted member of House Dayne considered worthy. Whatever that means, and its wielder is bestowed the title the Sword of the Morning. Its greatsword length, likely between 4.5 and 6 feet long, I lean more towards the shorter, almost bastard sword end just because we're given the impression Dayne fought with it like a longsword, and it was what he used exclusively, and a whopping 6-foot greatsword is quite a situational tool and not a useful weapon in more enclosed environments. But that's just my opinion, I could be wrong. Regardless of this, it's a greatsword and most definitely a two-handed weapon unless you're Gregor Clegane. Its blade is a pale milky white, and apparently shines with its own light. And finally, George R.R. Martin has said it's not out of the realms of possibility that a sword forged from a fallen star might have some magical properties. And who knows what they are. Thanks George, more mysteries and nothing to go on with that. And this is literally all the unique aspects that is known about this weapon as fact. Absolutely anything else you hear about Dawn's uniqueness is nothing but speculation or made up myths from fans, I'm afraid to say. And that's our take. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe. But that's boring, so let's get our geek on and dig into this speculation and separate what might be right and what is most certainly wishful thinking and answer Tom's question. Please note from here on though, we're in the realms of speculation like any other fan, but we'll try and back it up with as good a points as we can. Now Dawn is one of a kind, but thankfully it's confirmed by a canon source to be comparable with Westeros' other famously unique alloy, Valyrian steel, so we can apply some of the qualities of Valyrian steel over to Dawn with a strong degree of plausibility, while other properties are not so certain. Let's go through the list, Tom, that'll be fun, eh? Like Valyrian steel, Dawn is likely to be nigh on unbreakable from physical force and impervious to rust and the damage of time in its quenched and tempered state. This is backed up if the age of the blade itself is indeed accurate. 10,000 years is a long bloody time for a sword, especially one that's seen repeated use to retain its strength and viability as a functioning weapon. I'd say this property is confirmed. Due to the age of the blade, it'll likely also have the same property of never losing its edge and permanently maintaining its razor sharpness that cannot be matched by the best regular castle forged steel. This is because every time you resharpen a sword, you have to shave some of it away. Once, twice, or even 10 times, you won't notice. But after a few thousand years and a few thousand resharpens, you'll likely have a sword the width of a matchstick. This property is also confirmed. Then there's the properties we can't say carry over for certain, but are most likely to be the case. Dawn is likely to be much lighter than standard steel. This would make sense if it's giving Dayne an edge over Selmy, as it wouldn't really matter if you were up against a vastly differently weighted weapon like a hammer, axe or spear, but when taking a sword against a sword, that fraction of a second quicker weapon movement could make the difference, so definitely a plausible property. Then there's the tolerance to heat. Valyrian steel is confirmed to require magic and spells to be melted and reshaped, and nothing, not even dragonfire, can so much as scuff it once it's set again. Dayne. Dawn is also said to be magical, but the tale of its forging is that of legend, and Drogon never got a chance to blast it, so we have no way of knowing what actually went into making it. But because of the blade's age and the unbreakable nature of it, I would speculate that magic was also involved, and it's likely impervious to heat in all regards also, so also a plausible property. The final most interesting property to consider is unfortunately the most speculative one with the least evidence to back it up, but probably the one you all want a solid answer to. Can this thing kill Wights and White Walkers? The answer is a very unclear maybe. There is no evidence to suggest that Dawn is forged with obsidian involved, like there is with Valyrian steel blades due to their darkened color, which is of course what many believe give those swords their White Walker killing properties. The first theory to consider is that Dawn is actually related to the others/White Walkers in its origin, as it shares a description with the weapons wielded by those icy beings, at least in the books. Both weapons are described as pale, and I'm going to be honest, this is weak sauce and highly unlikely, as Dawn doesn't shatter Smiley or Ned's sword on contact, and the blade is described as milky white, not icy white, like the White Walker's weapons are, so I'm not wasting any more time on this theory, it honestly sounds like bollocks. The second, more interesting speculation is that there is another one-of-a-kind unique sword in A Song of Ice and Fire, and despite its extreme significance to the world of men, it is unaccounted for. The legendary blade Lightbringer that was used to end the Long Night. The parallels are certainly there. Both swords are said to give off their own light, and both were forged using the heart of something. And what follows on from the night? Dawn. Not to mention the ageless nature of the sword means it could have been around back then. Many suspect that Dawn may actually be the original Lightbringer, merely extinguished. If this is indeed the case, the magic within it will most certainly kill Wights and White Walkers. I mean, that would be its intended purpose at the end of the day. Of course, this could also be hokum, and Dawn may just be its own entity. If this is the case, the magic in it might make it strong enough to stand up to a White Walker's weapon, but it likely doesn't have any undead killing properties like Valyrian steel, obsidian, and maybe Stannis' Lightbringer 2.0 would have. This property is firmly up in the air. And now let's talk about the claim that is most definitely bollocks and why. Dawn can magically cut through other swords and plate armor with ease. No it can't. I honestly don't know where this claim comes from, but I'm going to assume it's extrapolated through a combination of Jaime getting a little nick on his shoulder when he was knighted, the Smiling Knight's sword getting notched up during his duel with Dayne, the fact Brienne managed to use Oathkeeper to cut through a sword and some ringmail, and a couple of Westerosi historical examples of Valyrian steel going through bronze helmets. Let's take a look at these feats. People picture Jaime wearing armor when he was knighted, but the reality is he was wearing just a tunic, basically nothing but cloth. You can even infer from the text that Dayne purposefully cut him. A regular, overly sharpened sword would also do this to a tunic, especially if the person doing the tapping has the intent to cut, and is likely pulling the blade slightly. Smiley getting notches in his sword is most definitely down to parrying edge on edge. This happens with regular swords clashing at the edges. They bite into each other, they chew each other up. It's just Dayne's edge is unbreakable, so it doesn't get notched also. If anything, this proves Dawn can't casually cut through other swords, even with a notably strong fighter like Dayne using it, because the duel lasted longer than the first swing, and long enough that Smiley's sword was chewed up enough to warrant needing a second one. Brienne cutting through another sword and ringmail with Oathkeeper also isn't anything out of the realms of feasibility for a regular well-made sword. Regular swords vary in quality and have a usage lifespan. They wear down and they weaken with repeated stress or neglect. You have to oil swords, to maintain them, and they can eventually break if struck in the wrong place at the right angle with enough force. The same goes for ringmail. Now, I won't argue you can cut through castle-forged riveted mail like silk with a regular sword. You most certainly can't, unless you're incredibly lucky and sufficiently strong, and I'm not dying on that hill, even though I'd argue Brienne certainly fits the sufficiently strong criteria. But cheaper, butted ringmail, which is likely to be what those low-born scum Brave Companion sellswords were wearing? Yeah, you whack that shit hard enough in the right spot, you can absolutely cut it open with a normal sword due to how its own weight pulls against it. Also, to prove this point, we have Sandor, who not only cut through Beric's flaming sword, but also some of his armor too, and and he's not even wielding Valyrian steel. Obviously, the fire helped weaken Beric's blade, but that's kind of our point. Stressed and worn swords can be broken by one in better nick. It doesn't have to be magical. And finally, the couple of Valyrian steel sword versus bronze helmet feats. Yeah, you know where I'm going with this. Perfectly within the goalposts of a regular, well-made steel sword. The point I'm making is, these feats are nothing special or unique to Dawn or Valyrian steel. They can and likely would have been accomplished with a regular decent quality steel sword in the hands of these two amazing warriors, and I personally find it just a scooch irritating when fans try to apply this lightsaber-like property to these special weapons. It's a logical fallacy they can do this, as we know people have crossed regular steel against Valyrian steel and Dawn and it's remained intact. We've seen it in the pages and with our own eyes. The most common use I see is fans employing it as a silver bullet to childishly try and win a versus fight where armor might be a factor. Like Dayne versus the Mountain, for instance. What these fans don't realize is you are diminishing the badassery of these two characters with these false claims. They are not great warriors because they have unbeatable swords that cut through everyone else's weapons and armor. They are great warriors because they are great warriors and have top-class skill along with amazing physical attributes. Both Brienne and Dayne are noted to be exceptionally strong. Of course they're going to ding up the things they hit. A superior quality sword that is really nothing more than lighter, stronger and sharper is just the cherry on top for them both. They could do what they do with a regular good quality steel sword. I honestly don't know why people want these weapons to be lightsabers. It makes the characters wielding them into dirty rotten cheaters rather than the amazing fighters they are. Oh, 7 hells, look at the time. Did you say you wanted this to be a quick one, Tom? Well, I'm sorry, my good man, but yeah, I've still got to answer your bloody question. Why is Dawn the decider between Selmy versus Dayne? I honestly wish I had a more intriguing answer, but it's honestly quite a dull and obvious one with the information that's currently available. It's not because Dawn will go through Selmy's sword and armor like a lightsaber, or that it has some magical sentience or powers. It's simply the same advantage that is provided by any old Valyrian steel sword. It's lighter and therefore more nimble and quicker to move around, and when people of near equal skill, attributes and equipment clash, that fraction of a second speed advantage Dayne has with Dawn makes all the difference in the world. I also think there's something to be said for familiarity of one's weapon. Because it's nigh on unbreakable and never needing replacement, Dayne has likely used Dawn exclusively after being named the Sword of the Morning. He will be incredibly in tune with its weight, its point of balance and how it handles to the point where it'll be like an extra limb to him. Selmy, on the other hand, was a busy boy with a busy life of action. That magnificent bastard will have had to replace his castle-forged swords countless times over considering how much use they got. Westeros swords aren't machine-made. A new sword, even if requested to be close to the old one, will always be a little different. A new weight, a new point of balance, a new feeling in the hands, and new factors to consider in its use. Again, when you're this closely matched, the familiarity of your weapon will make a ridiculous difference, especially when one is already lighter and more nimble than the other to start with. That, my friends, is why Dawn is the difference. No more, no less. Unless George smacks us round the face with Dawn doing something bonkers in Winds or some other canon material, this is the only logical conclusion. And that's our... What if they're through Barristan, Oathkeeper, or Widow's Wail, or some other Valyrian steel sword? Well, assuming you didn't just throw it at him 5 seconds before someone shouts, "Fight!" and allowed him to get familiar with how it handles, yeah, it stands to reason the difference would have been equalized, because Barristan is now rocking a comparable quality weapon. Common sense, really. I also read that George has said something about this being the case, but me and Tom couldn't find the bloody source quote, so could be more fan myths, I'm afraid. Sadly, Selmy never owned a Valyrian steel sword in story. If he did, it would have made George R. R. Martin's quote about Dayne with Dawn winning way more interesting. If we ever get wins and actually see Dawn do something unique, magical, or spectacular, we will of course amend our views and let you guys know. But until then, badass, yes. Cool, yes. Intriguing, absolutely. Unique, you betcha. Advantageous against regular swords, definitely. But lightsaber, no. And that's our take. So Tom, shall we maybe tackle Bobby's hammer?
Oh, fuck off. After what they've done to me, fuck off.
Oh, okay. Thanks for watching, guys.